Hey folks, look, what if you only got one shots and one opportunity to seize everything you wanted from one session? Well, if that's the case, you're going to love today's show because in this episode of Dragons and Dice, we're going over how I like to set up my one shots and how to run them. Welcome to Dragons and Dice. Who doesn't love a one-shot night in D&D? I don't know about you all, but I have about 100 different character concepts running through my head at all times and all different types of campaigns that I would like to run as a DM. The problem is, there just isn't enough D&D sessions to do them all. If you're running long campaigns, they can take years to do. The one I'm running right now is about to have its first year anniversary, and honestly, the party hasn't even really delved into what the main storyline and quest is going to be. So, if you're as a player or as you as a DM, you don't get to do all the things that you have ideas for, and this is why I love one-shots, because you get to try out something and see if you like it in theory, and then if you end up loving it, you have a good template for what you would like to play in a full campaign, or to build as a full campaign if you're a DM. And what I'm going to do here is go over a template for building one-shots and how I like to run them, and then give out a handful of little ideas that'll keep them running smoothly and keep you on that time restraint that you always end up having with a one-shot. And I structure this around a 4-hour one-shot, as that's what most of the ones I do end up being. And so let's check it out. So the parts that I use in my one-shot, and I'll just go through these as like a broad thing and then we'll delve into them deeper, is the first part's going to be getting the group set up. And I try to get this done in like 15 to 30 minutes, and it'll be slower if you have newer players. And then I have an intro, and this is going to be where the main quest of the one-shot's given out. And this is normally a social encounter and will take about 15 minutes. And then I like to have a travel element, and this is where you get from where the quest was given to where the crap's going to go down and that you get to do the fighting. And then I like to have a early first fight, and this lets the party kind of get a feel for their characters. And this should probably take you're about an hour in at this point. And then I like to have a second fight, a trap or a puzzle or something that's some sort of environmental element to it that gives the party something to do that takes another 30 minutes or so. And then I normally try to have an out-of-combat event that's something like a skill challenge or something like that. And then I have some time factored in for a little bit of loot. And then one final fight, and I plan to have an hour for the final fight if it's a big monster, and then go from there. So let's get the party set up, and this is going to be the hardest part for the DM for running one-shots, as you never know what you're going to get if you're running one of these out in the world. And if you're running one-shots for your home table or your buddies and experienced players, they will most likely show up with their characters rocked and ready to roll. But if you're going to be out in the world running one-shots at gaming stores and then DMing for new players, which is a good way for them to get a feel for the game, this bit's going to be a bit slower, and you should probably have some pre-made characters made for the newer players at the table to pick from. And this isn't a bad approach to any one-shot, as it gives you a lot of control of what options the players have and let you custom build the one-shot to what the party compilation is going to be. And that just gives you a nice little bit of control, and you kind of know what's the options are and you can prepare for. And during this part of the night, I like to go over with each player what their characters are capable of, depending on what level one-shot you're running, and how experienced they are. And if you have completely new players, I would suggest setting them closer to you at the table so you can help with their player sheets. And then finally, as the DM, you should also have like a comfort of play sheet that you let each of the players fill out. And this should state that the game is fun and that bullying and meanness won't be tolerated, and any of the isms, sexism, racism, any kind of bigotry, they're not going to be tolerated at your table. And D&D is one of those places where all walks of life should be accepted and comfortable, and you as the DM, you can keep your tables a safe and accepting place where everyone can be themselves and enjoy this great game. And that's something that all DMs should be doing, especially if you're out in the world running one-shots. And the other thing is that you should have on this sheet are questions about like phobias and stuff that makes people feel, the full ick. If you got somebody that hates body horror, then you need to be conscious of that. And when you go to describe like the kills of the monsters, not go into gory detail and all that, and respect their wishes. Same thing for like if people have phobias of snakes or spiders, put all that on the sheet, let people hand them to you in confidence, and then read through them before you start. You're a DM. It's really easy to change your monster around. If you got a jungle theme and there's a bunch of snakes that people are going to fight, you can just swap them to something else. That's not a big deal, but you should always be accommodating to what the people at your table want to be able to do. DM note here, You should tell game stores, if you're going to be running one-shots out in the world, what the setting is and the feel of your one-shot is. That way the people who want to sign up and play at your table can kind of have a good idea of what they're getting in for. If, some people love Eldritch Horror and you're running that kind of campaign, they're going to be all about it. Other people who aren't, they're going to know to kind of avoid that table and go to somewhere else. So just keep up front with the game stores that you're going to be running these in, and you'll be good to go. And if you're running for a home table, it's no big deal because you're just communicating with your friends before you start. So the introduction, and this is going to be where the crux of your one-shot is established. You don't get multiple sessions to develop story and motivate the group to go do quests. So this is where you're going to give them the information they need and have them hop to and get to work finding stuff and, smashing heads. For this, just put the party together already. Don't let that one person who likes chaos have reign over your table and be like, oh, I would never drink at that inn. It has rats. I only drink Baldurian wine from the Griffin's Wing pub. Don't let those people get you kiboshed right off the start. Just put the whole group in one area when you start the one shot. Your one shot has time restraints, and that's great out in the normal campaign. If that stuff happens, it's funny and fun. But these, you got 3 to 4 hours, and if that person wants to play in your game, you're going to have to, be drinking with the rest of your brotato chips and the ladies over here where the event starts. So during the introduction, you just need to do a few things, and then the party can be off and running. And no matter where you start them, you just need to tell them what the main objective is of the one-shot. And if you do voices for your characters, I think this is a great time to add in some humor and some social interactions, as one-shots don't really lend themselves to too much of that. So have an NPC with a goofy voice or whatever, intimidating voice, whichever ones you like to do. Give out the quest and interact with the party. And that lets you add in a social aspect. And that's a real big part of D&D and one of my favorites. And it's kind of a shame that this gets a little bit neglected in one-shots a lot of times. So during the intro of the one-shot, I normally like to schedule at least 2 to 3 NPCs that the party will interact with and that will interact with each other, and that's a good way to get the party started and going. Here are 5 starting areas that you can use in your one-shots that'll kind of group your party up and get the ball rolling and get that night moving. First off, tavern. Super easy. Gather for drinks. You've gotten a flyer or a message, and you're all here, and you're going to meet the NPCs. One of the NPCs can be the bartender. You can have a couple guys come in or girls come in and give out the quest, and it's a real simple, classic D&D setting. Second one, they're all in jail together, and you can have a nefarious guard that's going to slip them a key, and it's a jailbreak, and that's where they started off together. Real simple one too. Also, you get to add the NPC in, a little bit of social interaction. 3, everyone is at an event or something, and then something crazy happens. Like you've gathered for arena battles, and you're 5 adventurers that are in the stands, and then something goes amok, and a monster gets loose. Boom, you can get going, little fight to start, and then you get your quest from whoever was over the event. So nice, easy way, puts everybody in a group. Number 4, very similar. You can be at the king's court. He's gathered adventurers, mercenaries, whatever. And then the 5th one is you could just be a hired mercenary group and that the party already knows each other and works together, and this is just another day on the job for them. And that one's really nice because it works with any level of tech. If you want to be doing steampunk, space travel, high fantasy, Underdark, anything, mercenary groups, super easy way to get all your adventurers together. I will make a DM note here. I like to have a little something extra that you don't tell the party here, so that if you end up with a player who really likes roleplay and interaction and they want to insight check this quest giver saying, oh, is he on the up and up, they can. And have a little bit of extra lore prepared for them just in case that happens that fits in with your story. And that way that player gets to experience that part of D&D that they like in the role playing. It's nothing to just give out a little bit of extra snippet of information because they were willing to insight or try to persuade the guy to give them a little bit of more. And that's just a good way of keep that in your pocket. Don't give it away, but you have it prepared in case you need it. And at this point, you should probably be about 45 minutes into your session. You've taken 30 minutes to get the game started. Introduction is basically 15 minutes as you let everybody talk and role play out. And now there's nothing to do but start your adventures. Now let's travel to the area. And this is how you're just going to get from where you got that quest to where all the events are happening. And this can be as simple as a walk across town, or it can be a boat ride that takes you to a different plane of existence entirely. But one thing I like to do during this time is to let the party work in a few things. And first off, that's to let them have some interaction with each other. And as the DM, depending on how many extroverts and introverts you end up with at your table, you'll probably need to facilitate this a little bit, especially if it's a group of strangers. And the way I like to do this is I'll keep an NPC, whether he's a carriage driver or the captain of the boat, or someone that'll ask questions and kind of drive the conversation to get the people to interact with each other a little bit. And the other thing that I like to do is it makes a great transition into the first fight of your one-shot campaign. Because while you're traveling, you can be attacked by pirates, or you can be, raided by bandits, or there's monsters on the road, or maybe there's someone in distress. There's lots of options. And this is a good, seamless way to fit in that first fight, along with how the party got from that first end to where everything is going on. And so for the timing, if you're just doing travel and not going to integrate the first fight with it, use 15 minutes for your travel time. If you are going to integrate the first fight, plan out about 45 minutes for this, and that'll keep you on the pace that we're setting for the one shot. And so here are 5 ways I use for getting my players where they're going. You can just send them off on foot. It's boring, but people have been doing it forever, and it works, and it's easy to assault people on the roads. 2, you can have a nice carriage, car, spaceship ride, depending on what level tech you're playing, but it's just a nice way you hop in something, it takes you somewhere, simple and easy. Plus, that one throws in the NPC if you can have a driver. Number 3, and this one's kind of fun, is you can have a stable where there are exotic mounts, and each person gets to pick out a mount and head out into the wilderness on it until you get to where you're going. I'll have the armored owlbear, please and thank you. We'll name him Hoot. But if you didn't get the armored owlbear, you could use a ship ride, and if you have the party venturing out on the open seas to get to a place, I like this one a lot. It lets you kind of have mini naval battles, and there are some awesome siege equipment and rules for using cannons, ballista, and the like in the DMG now, and these are really fun. The current one-shot I'm running right now, this is what I'm using, and it has a ship battle as the first fight and as part of the travel portion, and it's had good reviews so far because it's really fun. There's, cannons to fire, and you can jump from one ship to the other, and it's an interesting way of getting to where you're going and still get to do your first fight. And then the 5th one, if for some reason you've been pressed for time and getting started, maybe someone was late, or you ended up with a table that's 5 new players, that's great for you. You're getting a DM for new people, but it does take a little bit of time to get started. You can just skip the travel section, gain those 15 minutes back in your time frame, and just have, a wizard opens a portal, and poof, you are now ready to go into the thing and hop right into whatever your campaign is going to be for the evening. DM note here, you should factor in extra stuff and stuff that you can drop from each section so that if you end up needing to adjust the speed of things on the fly, you can without it kind of throwing your one shot out of whack. If you have an experienced party and the group setup won't take as long as we've allotted for, or if it's all newer players and it's going to take longer, you don't want the session to run long, but you also don't want to shortchange people if they're expecting a 4-hour session. So have flexibility in each part that you build for your one shot. That way you can kind of speed it up here and slow it down there and keep you on the time path that we're shooting for. Now it's time for that first fight. And if you integrated this part in, it'll kind of be the part that ends your travel section of the one-shot campaign. This part's just what it sounds like. You give the adventurers something to beat up on, try their characters out. One thing I like to do is I will drop hints that there's going to be time for a rest before you get into whatever the main final fight of the boss is going to be. And that lets the players really try out their characters. They can use their spell slots, drop their cooldowns, and really get to experience the things that their one-shot characters can do. Like the one I'm running right now, the boat captain that they're on, or the ship captain, it's not a boat, it's a ship, will tell them that, they're still 2 days from reaching their destination, and then the party will be set upon by pirates, and they'll have their boat battle, but they know that they're going to get to take a rest before they end up where they're headed. I think this makes the one-shots more fun. You get to experience everything the character can do, and especially if you're a newer player, because let's face it, when you first start playing D&D, you waste a lot of resources thinking like, oh, I'm going to burn this cool spell because it does this, and then you're like, I wish I had that back for the rest of the day. This lets them try the character out, and if they're new or new to that class, they can tweak it in later fights, know how their stuff works, and it doesn't ruin the rest of the evening if you've like used all your cooldowns and you've got no second winds or action surges left. Not as much fun to play your fighter for the rest of the campaign. With all that said, I like the party to know that they can go ham on this first fight, that you're going to throw out some monsters for them and they can just blow them out of the water with everything they got because you know you're going to get a rest. I like to be kind of like a cupcake fight or a softball that you're throwing up to the party so that it's not really a chance of the monsters winning this fight unless something went terribly awry. But they get to try out everything they can. Make sure the monsters have enough HP that everyone's going to get a turn. Don't let some wizard blow everything up and then the rest of the party didn't get to do anything. But other than that, it's just like a nice filler out fight, and it gets the campaign rolling, and it lets people start killing stuff, which is always a fun part of D&D. So when you do your first fights, just make sure that they're level appropriate. Like if you're running level 3 one-shots, you can use orcs or really low CR monsters. Put one out per each member of the party and then maybe one extra to make it have a little bit of anxiety in the fight, as in like, ooh, we're outnumbered, but they're cupcakes and you're going to knock them out. If it's a level 5 one shot, you can move up to using like a couple CR3 monsters like a displacer beast, but don't put as many out. Put out like 1 or 2, something that's a little bit bigger, and it'll be a cool fight for the party, but they still kind of have the upper hand in turn economy. If you get up to like level 7 one-shots, you can put out like level 5 CR monsters here and maybe a couple lower like half CR or 1 CR monsters to kind of increase the action economy of the turns. And then if you're running like level 9 one-shots and up, just, you know, seed the monsters accordingly to what the skill level of the players are and what the characters can do. And just keep it to where it's a good fight, but it's kind of on the medium scale. It's not going to be a, you know, tooth and nail, I hope we make it through this type thing. And then the fifth option, and this one works at any CR, that's going to be a fight that the players can't win. And this is going to force the party to flee or have like a cinematic ending or an NPC that comes in and moves that one shot forward. I will suggest that you don't do this if it's like a full group of new players, because it's not really fun to suffer defeat in D&D, especially if it's like the first time you've ever played. But if you're running these for your home game and home tables, experienced players will be fine with it, especially if it leads to a good story and the opportunity of getting revenge later on. DM note here, I like this part to be built into my travel part, as I said earlier. I think it adds a bit of tension, like the world isn't a safe place. You were attacked just on the road to get to where you were going before you even get started. And it puts a good feeler out for you as the DM as how fast your players are going to be in combat. And that's why I like this first fight not to be very hard. It lets you tweak the later fights if you need to. If you have a bunch of people who are real wishy-washy over taking their turns, maybe you need to drop a monster or two later fights so that you stay on pace for your timing. And if you've got experienced players and they're just steamrolling it through, you know you might be able to add in an extra fight or add in some extra monsters to the other stuff you have scheduled for your one shot. For the second encounter on your one shot, this can be either another fight, a trap, or a puzzle if you're good at those. And this should be something that's different than the first fight was, where that was kind of like a simple encounter. This fight should probably tie in with what the party's trying to accomplish if you're going to use combat for this, i.e. they get an item off of a monster or a villain that they kill, and they're going to need that later on to get to the final boss. There should also be other ways for this fight to get started, where you're like ambushed on the first one and just thrown into combat. I like the setup for the second fight to vary. If you've got people who are playing rogues or rangers that are stealthy, or they just want to try to sneak attack or try to figure out ways around it, let the party make some checks and don't just throw them right into combat. Let them try to figure out creative ways to do the fights. And if you are using combat for the second encounter, I also like it to be something that has some elemental factors to it, as in there's statues that can be pushed over on enemies, or maybe the party's in a ravine and the enemies have the high ground, and then it lets your players be creative in trying to figure out ways to make it through the fight and to, you know, achieve victory, as opposed to like the first fight where it's normally like two-dimensional. You're just on a flat surface and I'm running over and hitting the guy across from me and they're doing the same thing. Make this one have some three-dimensional elements to it, and it'll make it a lot more enjoyable for your players, because it really makes them flex their creativity and think about how they're getting to certain areas to get to certain monsters, or how they want to go about the fight. And I think that's a really fun part of D&D that kind of gets neglected sometimes, because it's so easy when we play on a grid to just be like, I'm here, they're there, I step up to them, add a little bit of three-dimensional areas to your one-shots, and I guarantee your players are going to love it. And if you're a DM that likes running traps and puzzles, you could use that for this second encounter. You could do an exploration part that was dungeon crawly, and you're making perception, investigation checks, trying to figure out safe passage through whatever area you're in. I will say I tend not to do this in one-shots because they take time. And you can make people, especially newer players, become really paranoid about getting caught in a trap, and it'll really slow down the pace of your evening. So that's something to think about if you're going to try to use traps in a one-shot. On the other side, if you're a puzzle master, this could be a great time to add in a puzzle. Just pick out whichever your favorites are and throw them into the party and see how they handle it, and just have a way out if it turns out that no one's going to be able to solve your puzzle, because you don't want to get super bogged down when they're like refusing to go touch the one torch that's going to open the door for them to go on. 5 parts to the second encounter in your one shot. First up, option of stealth or trickery that the party can get the upper hand if you're using combat for this second encounter. Number 2, if you are using combat, environmental factors that make the fight more interesting, make it three-dimensional or have objects that can be moved and effects that happen when this goes on. Number 3, you can use exploration and traps. Number 4, if you're great at puzzles, you can do a puzzle here. And number 5, if you have a group that you can tell really likes the roleplay aspect of D&D, give them the option to negotiate with someone to get something they need and do a social encounter for this second one. But that's kind of a niche, and you kind of have to do that one on the fly, depending on how the party is for the evening. So that one you'll have to just kind of like play by ear, and if it's what you go with, just have a little bit of something written up that you know is an option. DM note here, I am not the best at running puzzles and traps. In my mind, they work perfectly, but sometimes to my players, they don't. And I find it's a hard line to give out enough info that they can figure out where the trap is or what the puzzle solution is without just giving them the answers. And I seem like I always err on the side of going too hard and like there's not enough info to figure the things out, because in my mind, everything works perfectly, but I do have all the notes in my hands while the one shot's going on. So that's really not fair to expect the players to have as much info as I do. And for this reason, I don't use the puzzles and one shots that much because they slow things down for me. But if you're good at it, just pick your favorites, do what you do. And if you're great at running puzzles, bully for you. That's a good skill to have as a DM. So we should be about 2.5 hours into this one shot by now. And here's a little thing that I like to do that I think makes one shots a lot better. It's time to give out some loot. But first, now it's time for the homebrewed item of the week. What a segue, right? Well done, me. This week's homebrewed item was made by my wife, Emmy, and she recently got to play a bard for the first time, and she found true joy in the use of insulting me with vicious mockery. And then she came up with this item, Bully for Me. If I add it to the game, she'll be able to do this to me all the time. But this is the elderberry hamster hat of insult. And the way this works is it's a tricorn pirate hat that has a rich dark purple color, and sitting in the middle, wearing a rich dark purple tricorn hat, is a stuffed hamster. And every 5 cantrips or normal attacks, depending on what your character is, it will hurl out insults at the target, and it suffers the effects of vicious mockery if it hits. But it comes with a caveat. If you miss, this hamster will insult you, and you will suffer the effects of vicious mockery. Add one to your game so your players can talk trash to you even more. I'm sure they will love it. And thanks to Emmy, I love this item. Alright, back to our one shot, and now it's time for some loot. And loot is one of those things that I don't see added into one shots a lot, and I think it's a pity because one, I'm a loot goblin and I love it. I think one of the best parts about D&D is getting stuff, and like it's part of the reason we play the game is you get to make your characters better and you find cool stuff that they can use. So what I like to do is add in like a one-time use item for each player, or simple weapon / arcane focus upgrades that let the players just get a little bit stronger in the middle of the one shot before you get to your end fight. And if you're going to do a one-time use item, it can be like a ring of spell storing that's level 2 to 4 spells stored in it. Give out comparable spells in each ring, but probably not the same ones. I mean, don't give somebody a fireball and then someone else like a lesser restoration ring. That's really feels less cool than the person who got to blow a bunch of monsters up. Try to keep it even and like kind of on point for whatever your one shots being, but give each person something a little bit unique that they can kind of put in their pocket to have to use when they want to. If you're running pre-made characters in your one shot, this will be really easy to do, as you just pick out one magical item for each of the pre-mades that you have. And then when you get to this part in the game, you get through that second encounter. Part of the thing that you find is this, loot cache. And then if you're playing the wizard, you get, this extra thing here. And if you're playing the fighter, you get this better sword or shield, etc. Just make something up before you start. And I will say, don't give it to the players to decide who gets what. That will be a complete poop show and will take forever. Just give out one item to each person. You do it, you keep control of it, and then you can spend the time like working in what that item does if you have new players, as opposed to a big long discussion because this person wants the fireball ring, not the lightning bolt ring. It makes it really easy. You just pass it out and then everyone gets something a little bit different, but everyone gets something that makes them a good little bit better. DM note here, if you like to give your players more options here, you can go ahead and pre-make like 3 items that the fighter can pick from and 3 items that a mage can pick from. Keep them all fairly uniform in, power level and rarity. And then go around the table. You have the option of these 3 items. You have the option of these 3 items. Let them pick one and then go on with it. And that'll let your players have a little bit more versatility if that's something that you're wanting to do. This can also be the thing that you kind of use as a way of slowing down the one shot. If you need to take up a little more time, give the players the option. If you're running behind, I would suggest you don't do that, and each person gets the first item on their list and you go on forward with that. Okay, now it's time for the last part before we get to the final boss, and this is going to be something that is an out of combat encounter. And the one I love to do for these is skill challenges. And I'm not going to break down all the different types of skill challenges that you can do, but if you want some ideas, I do have a podcast episode that's called 4 Things to Do Instead of Combat in D&D, and it has a list of like 10 of these on that. But for a recap, these will be like high-speed cinematic events where the players get to use their skill and creativity to resolve an encounter. And I really like these because they let your players flex their creativity and use all the skills that are on their player sheets. And since one shot, some of those kind of don't come up a lot. This gives players opportunity to kind of like flex the other skills that they have. And they're fast paced. And normally I'll do like, you have to make 5 passes before 3 fails and set the DC depending on what your one shot level is. And I normally base these DCs for skill challenges off of what the proficiency bonus is. So for levels 1 to 4, do like 10 to 12 DCs and then step it up based off each time the proficiency bonus increases, and you'll be good to go. DM note here, this is something that can be cut out completely if you're on time restraints. And these are also things that are real easy to add in if you have other situations that arise and have space for them. Like your one shot's running quick, they set off a trap and they've got to make an escape from that little bit of a dungeon or whatever works, as a way of like adding in extra time to your one shot to keep you on that. I will say I don't have the consequences for a failure in this ruin the one shot. Maybe something happens, everyone rolls bad. You don't want it to be like, well, now the door's closed and you can't get to the final boss. That would really suck. Just have them, suffer a little bit of a penalty. Maybe everyone loses a chunk of HP, 5-10%. And then if they succeed, maybe you get, the upper hand and you get a bonus to initiative or something like that. Just keep it small. Don't let it change like the total outcome of the one shot. Okay, you've done it. You've ran the gauntlet. You've got to the top of the temple or the bottom of the dungeon or whatever, but now it's time for the final boss. And if everything's going well in your one shot, you should have about an hour for this fight. And I think this is probably one of the easiest parts to DM for a one-shot, because you just pull out whatever the big baddie is and you get to go to war against those players. And by this time, you should have a pretty good idea of how your table's running and how they're going to be able to do in the fight. I do a few things here to like help adjust the fight on the fly if I need to. I'll keep some minions in reserve, and if I need to add troops to the fight so it isn't over too quick. Like, sometimes you'll go out there and party will get crit happy and like your boss loses 3/4 of its health on the first round. That ain't going to make for a very good fight for the end of a one shot. So if that ends up happening, I will have groups of minions that can pop in and increase like action economy for the enemies and add some more HP to that pool. The other thing that I like to do is I will keep legendary reactions and layer actions in my pocket. If the party's not doing well, I don't want to already have established that the layer's going every round on turn 20 on initiative and just blow them out of the water, especially for new players. That's not fun if you just get annihilated because you roll bad. I mean, it's part of it, but it shouldn't be the norm. So what I do is once the boss is bloodied, so that's 50% HP or lower, I'll start popping off these so that it keeps the fight challenging. And then if the fight is already too challenging, I just keep those in my pocket and don't use them. And it kind of lets me have like a good level of difficulty that I can adjust on the fly to make like a hard but winnable fight for the end of the one shot. And then when the final blow is struck, you should give out some good descriptions on how that big baddie dies. It makes it more fun and really interesting to the players if you give very descriptive, awesome, I always liken to Legolas doing all the crazy stuff he does in Lord of the Rings. Make it cinematic ending, have everybody join in. It'll make for like a fun, memorable D&D session, especially for new players. And don't end your descriptions with just the end of the fight. There was someone that gave you this quest, that party should meet back up with them if you have time. It shouldn't be you killed the dragon, good night, tip the waitstaff. You should go back and have a little social encounter with the king or queen or the wizard that gave you this quest and describe to the party the effects of their campaign and what it's going to do for the society and for all the things that they were trying to accomplish. And my last DM note here, if you have time to do the mini social event at the end, go around the table and let each person have an interaction with whoever they're giving the quest back and can kind of tell that person how their experience went. This will be nice for the quieter players at your table as they get a little bit of face time. And as the DM, it gives you some really solid feedback about the parts that the people really enjoyed about the session and about the campaign that you ran for that evening. So I hope this helps all you DMs and players out there make exciting and enjoyable one-shots. And if anyone needs help or has questions about building one-shots, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email from the link below. And I appreciate it, as always. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of Dragons and Dice. Thanks for tuning in and spending your time listening to me go on about my favorite TTRPG, Dungeons and Dragons. And like always, anytime you could leave a review, a follow, or a like wherever you get your podcast, it'd be greatly appreciated as it helps with the exposure of a new show. We're also now on Instagram. You can check us out in the link below. And until next time, may your DMs be kind, may your D20s roll high. Bye.